Hello everybody, this is Donnie Vaughn of Your School Marketing. We want to welcome you to the exclusive presentation for all the members of the National Christian School Association. Today's webinar, 3 ways to attract the right kinds of families to your school. All right, thank you, Donnie. I'm excited about presenting to you the 3 ways to attract the right kinds of families to your school and to those events that you're probably gearing up for right now. So many of you are probably gearing up for the holidays and maybe taking a little bit of time off to rest. But as I've been talking to schools all week long, there is a sense of excitement and yet a little bit of pressure knowing that as soon as that new year starts, the marketing season just goes into full swing. Some of you have an open house or a preview night or some sort of coffee right off the bat. I mean, even within a couple of weeks of getting back from the new year. So I know many of you are excited, and yet there's a little bit of anxiety over this. So I just want to help during this presentation to give you some ideas on attracting the right kinds of families to the next marketing event you have that ultimately will hopefully lead to the right kinds of families enrolling at your school. And so I wanted to kind of, I'm on a different computer, so I'm going to try to navigate a little bit here, but let me introduce my family to you right on the screen there. My wife Kelly and I have been married for 18 years. We were both graduates of Abilene Christian University, and you'll see my daughter Tori in the middle, and then 2 boys, Timothy on the left, Jonathan on the right, and then our daughter Katie there on the bottom. So we're excited to share with you some ideas today, but I wanted you to get a sense of who I am. As a graduate of Abilene Christian University, I have to mention Dr. Patterson at Oklahoma Christian University, who of course is the president of NCSA, and he and I have been talking about doing this webinar for quite a while, and so I appreciate his endorsement, his willingness to speak out to all of you via email, inviting you to this exclusive presentation. We have not done this presentation for anybody else before, and so you guys are getting this presentation that we haven't done for anybody, so we're excited about sharing this with members of the NCSA. I was at the conference in Oklahoma City last March, if any of you were there. I know we had a big crowd, and I know I will be again going to Nashville as well. So Nashville conference is coming up the first week in March. You can go to nationalchristian.org, the NCSA website, to find out more details later on. I don't think there's a lot up there right now, but after the first of the year, I imagine there'll be news about registering for that and getting, and some of you have probably got some of that in the mail as well. So certainly go to nationalchristian.org and find out more information or watch your mail. And again, thank you for Dr. Patterson for his endorsement and help getting this webinar started. So yeah, it's the first one that we've done for NCSA, so we hope to do many more, and then maybe talk to Dr. Patterson before about others, other people coming on and doing webinars for you guys. And we just want it to be, I came to him and said, I want to do something that offers value to members of the NCSA. And so I hope that you'll find this valuable today as you look at your marketing season coming up. So I wanted to talk about, as we look at marketing, we want to make sure you're attracting the right kinds of families. We can all attract families. We can all attract people, even quantity of people, to our marketing events. But are we getting the right kinds of families? Are they getting the kind of families that we want at our school? Are we getting the kind of families who can afford to pay at our school? Or who are we getting to the open house or to the preview night event? So I wanted to talk about that today and learn some for many of you, will be a new way of marketing. I've been talking to some schools this week, even got on the phone this morning with a school that this was pretty new to them, and yet it made sense, and I hope that it'll make sense to you today. Again, as a little bit of a background about me, I've been doing marketing and consulting with small businesses and ministries and Christian schools for almost 6 years, going on 7 years. Even before that, though, after graduating from Abilene Christian University with a degree in marketing, God took me on a different road for about a decade of my life, where I got to be a part of something that changed my life, changed our family's life, and that was being a church planting and leadership training missionary in the country of Benin, West Africa, right next to Nigeria, not too far from Ghana. over in that western coast of Africa. So that is what this picture represents. This is one of my favorite pictures. It represents a number of my favorite Christian leaders there, the men that I helped bring to Christ and also to raise them up to be leaders. And these men are all leaders in their congregation now. And as you saw from the first slide, I'll go back to that one so you can see, but obviously we adopted our daughter Katie there on the bottom from Africa. And long story short, I'll have to tell you that the gentleman right below me in this picture in the yellow shirt, his name is Ega Nyaling, and that is his biological daughter. And Ega is crippled, and his wife passed away from childbirth, and he already had a number of other kids, and so he asked us if we would raise Katie as one of our own. And so we went through and adopted her with his blessing, and that is a beautiful story and wonderful. Love to tell as many people about that as possible because it's God's hand in doing that. So I'm just always love to tell that story. But this picture represents, to me, this was the last Sunday that we were in Africa before we moved back to the States. And so it's a special picture. It was an emotional time for these men. It was an emotional time for me as well. But when I look at this picture, I also have thought about overall the time that I spent in Africa. Part of what I did in Africa in learning to communicate to these men are all part of the people group called the Aja people in southwestern Benin. And the Aja people, we look at that, anybody else might look at that and say, well, those look like African men. Well, they are African men, but they're more specific than just African men. They're not even just African men from the country of Benin. In the country of Benin, there are a number of people groups. And so you get more narrow to that and realize these are men of the Aja people group, and even more specifically, they are of a certain dialect of the Ajagbe language. And so one of the things that I learned as I reflect back into my time in Africa, as I started to work with ministries and organizations and schools about marketing, was there's so many similarities in communication and what we were doing with the gospel and presenting ideas about growing churches and growing leaders. There's so much that we should learn about marketing especially in our Christian school. And we'll talk about some more details about that later, but I wanted to start with this idea that these men represent to me what we did there. We went and learned the Aja people. We studied them. We knew them well, learned their language. I became fluent in the Ajagbe language. And not only learning the language, the vocabulary, many of these men were very influential in teaching me the language, but they also taught me about the culture. They taught me about the customs of the people. And I learned these people. I learned also not just mannerisms and things on the outside, but as I learned more and more, I learned what they thought. I learned about what they feared. I learned the dreams that they had. I learned what a typical Aja young man would be thinking about his future. And it's very different than a young man in America. I thought we studied a lot about the older men and what they thought about the afterlife. And it's very different than what most of us on this call think about after we pass away. And so there's many things that we learned by studying the people. And we knew them well. We knew what they thought about and what they feared, and we just studied them well. And so, but in doing that, we then were able to communicate more effectively with them because we understood what some of their pains were, what their fears were, and then we were able to present a solution. Now, the gospel is also always the solution, but we were able to present it in a way, just in the same way Jesus presented parables to communicate certain principles of the gospel. We were able to present that in stories and in illustrations that really tapped in to what they were. It wasn't just what I wanted to project as an American. I was able to communicate in a way that they would understand. And so you all kind of know that. You probably think, well, that's pretty basic, isn't it? That's what Jesus did. That's what we should do. But it's surprising when we look back that as just a basic communication about something that you want, you think about, you love, and you're passionate about, and you want to share that with someone else. That seems rather natural. But when it comes to school marketing, we almost ignore that principle. So I wanted to talk about that today as we get started. So we will get to 3 practical ways to attract those families. And so I just wanted to talk about not the 3 ways we're going to attract the families, but 3 principles first that I learned in Africa. I already mentioned it first, is that we have to understand who we're marketing to. We have to understand the people, the audience. And like I mentioned, these are not just Africans. These are Aja Africans. These are very specific language dialect. You have to know your people. Who's your audience? And I suggest everybody, if you were to take that oval shape where it has the word people in it, I would dissect that, slice it up like a pie, and you're probably going to have multiple segments of people. It could be based on their location. It could be based on their gender that you're talking to. It could certainly, many of you are going to be needing to slice that up according to the grades. Many of you are talking to preschool or kindergartner families. And some of you are talking to middle school or even upper school, high school age families. And so you need to understand the people, and you have to market. And marketing is just about communication, so you have to market to the very specific kind of people. We just do a lot of, in Christian school marketing, I just see a lot of real global messaging, kind of a big net, and we just toss it all out there and hope it sticks on somebody. And really what happens is that everybody ignores it. The right kinds of people that you're trying to attract tend to ignore it because they don't think it's for them, because it's very broad, very generic. And you see this on websites, you see this in brochures, and a lot of times in those kind of, especially in printed materials, you almost have to, the tendency is to say, hey, it costs a lot of money to print this. We just need to do a message that kind of reaches everybody. And I can see the practical side of that, but we also need to come up with more targeted content for the types of people and the segments of those people that we're trying to reach. And like I said, we understood, I learned to know what the needs of the Aja people were. Yes, there were a lot of physical needs. They were hungry. This is a poverty-stricken area. Many days, I couldn't even start a meeting without having to at least feed the men first because they were so hungry. But once we did, we were able to proceed with studying the Word of God. We have to understand their needs. We have to understand the needs, who you're trying to reach to. What are their needs? And I like to expand this a little bit to a phrase that if you're working with us, one of the things that you hear me say over and over, it's almost a comical phrase because I say it so much, is that once we understand the people, we need to understand the needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears of these people. Once we understand who this is what keeps somebody up at night. This is what people talk about when husband and wife are sitting around drinking coffee late at night, and the kids have gone to bed, and they're thinking about the education. Maybe they're thinking about that problem at the current school. Maybe it's a public school, and they're having difficulties with the curriculum or with the culture at that school. Or maybe they're in a homeschool environment, and it's just not working like they thought. They wanted to be in charge of creating the environment for their kids, and wanted they had several friends who did homeschool, and they just wanted to try it, but they're finding themselves stuck saying, we're just not sure we're giving our kids the best education that they can get and preparing them for college. This is the pain, the frustration, maybe fears that the families are wrestling with. Once we understand this and we can know it well, then we can start producing content that educates and builds trust. This trust is earned. It is not automatic. You don't get to have trust with your audience just because you're the only Christian school in town. You're not going to have trust simply because you are a Christian school and there's many other public schools around you. You don't get to have that. You have to earn that trust. And the only way, when you're marketing, you have to think about, how can I communicate to my audience, the specific audiences I reach to? Do I understand what their needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears are? And then what kind of content have I produced? What evidence have I shown that's going to help build that trust? It takes a long time. You don't just get to put out a brochure or send out a direct mail campaign or have someone to come to one of your events and just immediately say, okay, let me sign up. That may happen for some of you, but most likely they've been nurtured beforehand. And in this day and age where we have so much online, our consumers, you're probably more, whether it's suspicious or more your desire to be more educated, you're probably researching more than you ever imagined you would. Even just to go to a restaurant, we tend to look online to see what reviews are given. We might, if we were ordering something on Amazon, how many of you will you just really ignore all the reviews, or do we glance through and see what other people are saying? We need to doing those kind of things as in Christian school marketing so that we can earn the trust of the people we're trying to reach. Because this is what we typically have seen. Again, going back to regular, typical marketplace models that have been in place for decades, the idea was if you had a product, you would put a price tag on it, and then you would just promote it, and then everybody would come. And you put a promotional ad on TV, you put it in the newspaper, in a magazine, and people would just show up. And so the idea that we just have a product, Christian school education, and that you have a tuition price tag on it, and then you just put a billboard up, you put direct mail postcard in every mailbox in 3 zip codes around your school. If you just have that, that is marketing, then I just don't think that's the way it's going to work. I think your families that you're trying to reach, that audience, that people group, they're not going to, that's just not the way they operate. And you're probably in that same group too. You wouldn't want somebody marketing to you that way. You want to be more engaged. You want to have more opportunities to learn and get to know, like, and trust that business that you're buying from. And in the same way, families are wanting to know, like, and trust you as well. And so we want to just keep going back to this idea that in marketing, to give you kind of a real succinct definition, we want to think about marketing is getting people, those specific targeted segmented people, they have specific needs, getting people with specific needs, problems, pains, frustrations, fears, to know, like, and trust you. And there's a lot of things we can do, and we're going to talk about that today, and that'll give you some ideas of what I mean by giving them an opportunity to know, like, and trust you. Because that's what marketing is about. And if you have a moment to write down that as a definition, that comes from a guy named John Jantsch from Duct Tape Marketing, and I'm actually involved in that organization as well. When we consult with small businesses, it's a very simple definition: getting people with specific needs to know, like, and trust you. And so I just think that fits well with schools today. And so I wanted to share that with you as well. As we get into our conversation, we're going to kind of spend most of our time talking about the idea of those needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears. And so that's where we're going to camp out a lot of our time today. I did want to say at the end of our call, you're going to get some information about something unique we're offering for NCSA. Normally we offer a 30-minute free consultation over the phone. You can go to our website and get a 30-minute consultation with us, but we've increased that to 15 minutes more just for you guys with NCSA today. And I kind of, just to be honest with you, I don't have a clock that I go by on this. I like to ask a lot of questions and probably like to talk a lot too. And so I can guarantee you that we'll probably have a little chance to go over that as well. So you're going to get a lot of time with me, and it's just absolutely free. I'll tell you how to get that later on. Okay, continuing with this idea, this definition at the top of the screen, getting people with specific needs to know, like, and trust you, you really need what I've kind of simplified down to as a marketing formula. This is not a plan. Your plan will actually be more specific when it gets into, your school, your strategy, your tactics, your content, all that kind of stuff. So I just want to give you the formula, and I just mentioned in brief. So let's go through it real quick. You need a strategy. A strategy is knowing who is your audiences, and how many do you have, because you have multiple audiences. You certainly don't need to be communicating with one generic audience. I like to tell people to put picture frames up on your wall. Maybe if you're in admissions, if you're writing content for the website or the social media or a newsletter that's going out, I'd say put a picture frame up. Maybe there's a certain family at your school that kind of represents several other families like that. Take a picture of them and put them in a picture frame and put them on your wall and say, this is kind of the typical family for high schoolers. They just represent. This is, maybe they have 3 or 4 kids coming through there, and they're excited and they're happy. But then also maybe there's a family that came from, let's use the homeschool example, because I have a client up in Maryland who this is what they've run into a lot of former homeschool families that really wanted to homeschool to work. They just weren't finding that they were feeling successful as teachers, and so they've moved over to the Christian school and finding great success there, great partnership with them. And so, they've got a picture of somebody that represents kind of the homeschool community.
And really you put physical profiles, reminders of who you're talking to. And then you're able to know that strategy is really understanding who they are as a profile, maybe what their needs, problems, pains, frustration, fears, a little bit about the demographics, where do they live. Again, are you talking to the mom or the dad? Are you talking to the kids? Or, what types of, socioeconomic background do they have? Where do they go to school? I mean, you really try to create a profile, a persona that really, when you're typing that in email, you kind of can physically look at them and say, I'm writing to them as if they're sitting across the desk from me. You don't want to just write out into the sky and try to talk to everybody at the same time. It just won't work. If you have a strategy in mind, you know who you're targeting, you know what their needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears are, then you're able to really point out the things that make you unique and different and that really set you apart from your competition, whether it's homeschool, public school, other private schools. And so you have an opportunity to really create a strategy based on that. After you have the strategy in place, you've got to come up with a tactical plan where you get out your toolbox and you say, okay, we're going to use these kind of tools to reach those families. It may be we want to do direct mail. Maybe that family's not going to ever respond to direct mail. We need to go something more like social media. We need to look at Instagram or Pinterest or maybe Twitter, maybe in Facebook. How do we need to use that? So tactical approaches. We need to do an event. We need to create a TV spot. Whatever it is that we tactically will use to reach that family. And then, as I mentioned, you've got your strategy and tactics, but you also have to have content. We're just in a day and age, especially online, where 5-10 years ago you could say, hey, we had a www, we had a website out there. We could say a URL that had a www beside it, and we all felt good. But in reality, that's not good enough anymore. We have to have content that's all over the website, and content that we can share on social media. We need to be able to put that into an email marketing message going out to prospective families. We need to be able to have things that we pin onto Pinterest. We need to be talking about how to use Twitter, where we're sharing ideas, sharing content. And we'll talk about what kinds of content in just a moment, because that'll be where we really get into the ways to attract the right kinds of families using content. Because if we don't understand yet that as a school, we're not just promoters. As an admissions professional, you're not just a promoter of your school. You're not just there to pass out brochures, buy advertising space, talk to media buyers that will set you up on a TV spot or a radio spot. That's not your job. Your job is becoming more and more as a content producer, a publisher of content. And that content's going to have a lot of different forms, and we're going to talk about the 3 ways that you can produce content that will attract the kind of families you want to reach. And so as we talk to content, this is what we're going to do the rest of our time, the next half hour of our time together. We're going to talk about this third part of the marketing formula. You have your strategy, you have your tactics, and again, most of those are going to be very specific to your school. But I want to give you some ideas of content that I think could be, for any of you, you could adopt some of these things. But again, the content, our first initial reaction when I ask a lot of times clients or when I'm talking to schools about this, the instinct is to say, well, content in that, well, we have a brochure, we have a view book, we have, our website, we have all of these things. Well, that content focuses on you. That talks about you. It's like going into, a Bible class or a meeting with a friend at Starbucks, and you say, hey, let me just talk about me for the whole time, and then, we'll just leave. I mean, that's not going to be very exciting for your friend at all, and not going to be exciting for the other people in your class. You want to talk about what really gets, especially if you look at that analogy of a small group in a church or a Bible class, it's not even when maybe even the teacher produces just content about a topic, but it's when the group really shares needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears. That's when the community really starts to happen. And when you can, as a Christian school admissions and marketing and communications professional, when you have the opportunity to write and publish content that really speaks to those needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears, then you start gaining the confidence, you start gaining the trust of your audience. And that's where we go back to that idea of you have the people, needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears, and then you have you have an ability to earn their trust. And so these are the families that we're trying to reach. But the reality is, and again, I talk to schools all the time, and we're just becoming more and more aware that this is just a fact. They're not looking for your school. They're not looking for your school. If they're searching online for other opportunities, they're not searching for your school. They're searching for a solution. They're looking for something that's going to solve a problem, that's going to alleviate a pain. It's going to satisfy a frustration. It's going to be something that's going to take care of their need. That's when we talk about needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears. When you create content that showcases, it's evidence that you as a school have the ability to meet a need, solve a problem, take care of a frustration or fear, then you've earned their trust. And so what we've got to do in marketing is do less self-promotion. And actually, I'm going to be writing an article probably the next month that's going to be called Selfie Marketing. Well, we've got to stop selfie marketing. You probably, if any of you have teenagers, or you probably, even adults do this, celebrities do this all the time, where they take their smartphone, turn it around and face it at themselves, take a selfie picture. And I just think if you look across social media and Instagram and some of those places where you're just inundated with selfies, and it's almost gotten comical. But in reality, I thought, that's kind of what traditionally schools have done with marketing, is they've done a bunch of selfies. It's like you look at something and it's all about the school. Well, as a family, as a prospective family for your school, I don't want it to be about you. I want it to be about me. I want you to be concerned about me. And if you can earn my trust, if you can produce content, if you can showcase evidence that you and I click together, we have the same values, and you can alleviate problems, and your school can take care of some of the fears that I have about educating my child to where I'm at currently. If you can show me how that's going to work, then you will earn my trust, and I guarantee you I'll find out everything I need to know about you. I'll then go and read all your brochures, but most likely your brochures are not going to be that compelling to me up front if you haven't earned my trust yet. So we're going to get into the 3 ways, finally, the 3 ways to attract the right kinds of families to your school. So really, it comes down to three pretty simple areas. We want to think of 3 primary sources of content for your school. One is just written content, things that you can produce on a computer. I guess you could write it out by hand, but most likely most of you are going to be producing written content from a computer. And we'll talk a little bit more about that next. We're going to get into audio, things that people listen to. And then finally, the one that most everybody thinks about is visual content. And we're going to talk about each one of these specific. I'm going to get a little more detailed into the written part, because I do think it has an opportunity to reach a lot more people, even though video seems to be the obvious thing. Video just has some limitations. You're probably thinking, oh, I'd love to do video, but I just don't have the technology, I don't have the time, I don't have the expertise to really pull it off. Audio, I'm not even sure what he means by that. But written, I can type on a computer. I can write something. So I'm actually going to spend a little more time on the written part. I think you can see as we go through this how some of these same principles apply to audio and visual. But let me spend some time on the written part, just to give you an idea of some of what the types of content that I'm talking about when I'm thinking about publishing content that earns trust, that yet talks about the needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears of your people, of your audience. And so I mean any number of things, like downloadable reports, ebooks. What I mean by ebook, not something that you have produced that's for a Kindle only, or I'm just talking about a simple PDF, something that if you're on some sort of program on the Mac, or a Word document on PC or wherever, that you can simply convert to a PDF. And that's fairly common nowadays. People are able to read PDFs. Most everybody's got some sort of Adobe Reader that they can get. It's free to read, but more and more people have that where they're used to seeing PDF. So we're just talking about creating PDF content. It makes it really easy for you to produce, and then you just put it up on the website. And I'll talk a little bit about this and how we do it in just a moment. But I'm just talking about creating the content, turn it into a PDF, and you essentially have it could be called a white paper, it could be called a report, or an ebook, whatever the language is. They're roughly all the same, but I'm talking about something that's short enough that somebody could download and read. It may be, maybe one page. It might be up to 10 pages. Beyond that, you want to give people a heads up that this is some sort of comprehensive, publication that you've got that'll take some time for them to digest. Anywhere from 1 to 5, maybe 10 pages at the most, I would think that you could do. You could do this, especially if you have the right kind of program. I'm a Mac user, and so I do a lot of things on InDesign, and I can, put in my document. I've got the text of the content, but I also can add pictures. I can even make the PDF a little more interactive, where if they click on something, it'll go to the website. It'll open up an email address if I click on the email address of somebody in the PDF. And so I can do a lot of things like that. And you can too in producing content. Articles and blogs are another source of content, written content. I love having articles. Again, and we'll talk a bit about some specific ideas I have in mind for that. But again, one of the articles that you might write is for your own newsletter publication. Have some people on your staff who are writing articles, but also having 2 ways to have guest articles. Think about guests presenting ideas, presenting articles. Maybe you go out into articles that are in your community, maybe on community blogs or mom blogger sites, or anything that in a community newsletter or a newspaper, you want to be writing content. And again, it's not promotional content. It's content that helps solve a problem or alleviate a concern or a need or frustration or fear. Blogs are the same way. Having a blog on your site is almost becoming absolutely essential nowadays, because again, how do you produce fresh, relevant, dynamic content if you still have to call down to the webmaster and it's going to be 3 weeks before they can change your page? Some of you still have websites like that, and it's just got to change, and you've got to have a website that's much more user-friendly, something that you can fairly easily make a change to and upload some content. Blogs are just a simple way to integrate those into your website. Many platforms have those nowadays, where you can just launch a blog and create articles to your heart's content. And in the publishing world, you've got to do that. If you step back and think about the publishing world as it's changed, whether you subscribe to a People magazine at some point in time, well, that was a monthly magazine, or I don't know, it was a weekly magazine, I'm not sure, but whatever those kind of articles, Sports Illustrated, those things, those would come out, every week or so. Well, now, Sports Illustrated has to have a daily, almost hourly content calendar, because they've got to be able to update things on a regular basis. I'm not saying you as a school have to update your website on an hourly basis, but culturally, your audience is expecting more from you than a website that looks like it probably was created 5 years ago, and it looks like maybe it was stayed that way, that it was just static, that all the content is just still the same thing. They come to expect you to, have some relevancy, have some timeliness to it, so where they can come to your website and see that you're engaging with the community and the contemporary culture. You want to be able to see that. Not to mention search engines they reward dynamic content, fresh content. So if you created a website and hadn't touched it in 5 years, which I'm surprisingly find out more and more schools say, I haven't been to my website in a year, well, there's a problem with that, because it means you're not producing content. It means you put up a website and you left it. That doesn't work anymore. We've got to move to producing kind of content on a regular basis. So articles and blogs integrated into the website create an opportunity for you to do that. So let me give you some examples of that. Again, the idea of written content is not to write self-promotional material. You've got to get away from, you've got to think about not as, even though you're an admissions professional, you cannot think of yourself writing as such. Now, yeah, if you've got to write the annual redo of the brochure, you probably want to have those on your countertop, and you want to have maybe a view book or something like that showcases a little bit more about your school. You want to have some content on your website that describes all the different departments, and those are the things. But I just think those are the things that people will come to after you've earned their trust, after you've at least shown them some level that you may be part of the solution that they're looking for. They'll get to all that stuff. But the way we're looking at content now is a way to attract, like like a magnet. We're trying to attract the right kinds of families to your school. You've got to talk their language. Just like I talked about when I went to Africa, I would stand in the middle of a village under a mango tree. And I am honestly the guy that sticks out like a sore thumb because I am white-skinned. I'm obviously a foreigner. And I would sit there and be amazed at even just pulling up. I mean, yeah, I was different. And I would attract a little bit of a reaction from the village. But then I started speaking. And at first, I don't think they expected me to speak their language. And then when I broke out into the local dialect, speaking it, and I don't know how this happened, but God's just really good and his spirit is really good. But I had some Aja friends say that I spoke, probably because I was a purist and I really studied it well, but I would speak so well that they said I sound just like any of them, which I was surprised at, but they said I could speak it that well. And that's just testimony to God's desire to speak to them. But when I would speak that language in the midst, just sitting under that mango tree, delivering God's word, all of a sudden, out of hut after hut after hut, there would be people streaming in to hear, because they not only were just hearing from a foreigner, I think at that point in time they were ignoring that it was a little bit of a, I guess a fun thing to hear a foreigner speak their language. That was a little bit of a part of the show, I guess, but that they thought. But what really attracted them was they were hearing the word of God spoken in their language. And I think that gave me an audience. I was able to speak to them, and I earned their trust over time to where eventually I could speak into really difficult areas. I was able to talk to them about transformable things. Is that a word, transformable? The real deep issues of idolatry and polygamy and black magic and things like that a normal foreigner shouldn't be talking to people about. That's nobody's business, But I had earned their trust, and over the years, I was able to have some really good, deep conversations with people because I understand the needs, problems, and pains, and frustrations, and fears. And all I'm doing is telling you that that's the way we're going to talk about this content. All right, so now we're going to get to some ideas. So I've got some ideas here. So think about, and again, in the yellow there, it indicates that if you're targeting your people, and again, you've sliced that pie a little bit, and you're targeting to elementary people, you've got content ideas like this: 7 mistakes that Christian parents make in raising disciples. First of all, I think that, when you're writing content, the title is so key because it gives you a sense of, as you're looking at that thinking, whoa, gosh, I don't want to make that mistake, so I better read it. But that's a fear too. Christian parents want to raise good disciple Christ followers. And so, obviously if you're able to write a report about this, then you're going to get people to open this content. What we're doing here is we're attracting the right kinds of families to our school. Notice it didn't say 7 reasons why you ought to enroll in our Christian school. That's not what kind of content we're producing here. We're talking about needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears. 3 tips on steering a strong-willed boy to success at school. How many of you, think about how many people would download that article, click on that, how many frustrated moms and dads who would say, if this school can give me some ideas on that, hey, let's go to their website and look. You know what happens at the website? They click on there. Here's a key to what we're talking about this, is when they come to this and they get this written content, you simply put it and say, hey, we have this available for you, and we will email this to you. And you put in there a box. You can do this through a lot of email marketing distribution services like Constant Contact or MailChimp, where you make it kind of hidden behind that and say, hey, give us your email address, and then once you get that, we'll send you the report, or as soon as they put their email address in, they click on it, and the PDF opens up. There's a lot of different ways to do that, and we can help people do that. We do that all the time. But the content is what attracts the people. And then what you do on the other end, you're not only earning the trust of these families, but you're also gathering database information. You're getting your database filled up with email addresses of people that you can then contact on a regular basis, not to spam them and immediately start sending them promotional materials, but to start earning their trust, talking about the things that are important to them. And then sometimes it takes, days, weeks, months, but you've got them in your database. So that's the way that works. And then, another 13 moms reveal their secrets about parenting daughters. Again, taking some of your moms at your school and say, could y'all do one tip, and then put it into an ebook, a PDF, And these can all be written by counselors at school. It can be written by volunteers, parents. I just think it's a lot of fun content that's really attractional, gets people to come to your site. So again, the yellow, we moved to middle school. What age should my daughter get a cell phone? Or maybe what age should my child get on social media, which would be a hot topic because even though a lot of places have restrictions, you're supposed to be 13 years old, but middle school, hey, a lot of kids get excited and they start getting out there at 10, 11, 12 years old, and they shouldn't be, but they're out there anyway, and parents need to have that conversation. But maybe you as a counselor or somebody on your staff or maybe have a somebody in the community who is a counselor who's seen maybe has some wisdom on this. Maybe they could write an article for you. Maybe you've got one of a mom or a dad who's a counselor, and they could write an article and they lend their expertise to you, and then you publish that as one of your pieces and give them attribution as well. So it's a win-win for both your school as well as the counselor. But hey, you've given some content that they're thinking about you're talking about their fears. You're being useful and helpful to those fears. You're not talking about your school anymore. You're talking about them, and that's real key. Again, things about the public school, disturbing facts in the public school textbooks. Well, that's provocative enough to get people's attention. How to have a social media contract with your team. These are things that you could write about. You know about it. Sometimes we have to think beyond being a marketing and admissions person. We have to think about the needs and the problems and pains and frustrations and fears of our audience and what are they interested in, and then using this as attractional content. So high school. Again, I worked with a school just recently in Colorado that we helped get this idea started, and now they have a downloadable ebook, 7 tips to choosing a college, written specifically to families who have this fear, frustration, whatever, about choosing the right kind of college. They weren't sure if they should go to a secular college and be a light for Jesus there. They don't know if they should go to a Christian college. They don't know if they should go to a community college, or that's a fear and concern about a lot of families, and financing the education is another big deal. So this counselor at the school who works a lot with high school families wrote 7 tips on choosing a college. It's very informative, very little promotion, but obviously it's got their brand on it. It's not heavily branded, but it's just subtle enough to where it gives you that sense of, hey, I'm reading something that's not about them, it's about me. It's about my concerns and my fears. Again, things that you could do, again, social media is a hot topic. Disturbing things high school girls are doing with Snapchat or Ask.fm. Certainly, if you don't know what those 2 things are, you probably ought to find out, because those are some things that, kids can have a lot of fun with it, but there's some really dangers in that as well that you need to be talking to your students about. Snapchat and Ask.fm are pretty, can be potentially dangerous sites. So hopefully you're talking to them about that. But again, why not, rather than just talking to many of you might say, well, we're going to gather all the high school girls in one class and then the high school boys in another. We're going to talk about this. Why not share that with the world? Why not share that with your community? Why is that just reserved for your students? Make that available to everyone. I mean, why not put an ad in the paper and say, we're going to do a seminar on understanding social media, Snapchat, and something like texting or something like sexting is what they call it, understanding those kind of dangers. Well, you as a school get to host that and then put an ad in the paper and say it's open to the public. You're producing content like that. So again, other things that you could write from written content. And this is the idea. You're producing, you can see, I've gone through 9 different examples of written content, none of which talks about any school. It doesn't talk about you at all. Certainly, but you become the voice of the content. You become the trusted source of that. And imagine if you're producing this on a regular basis. You're producing an ebook. Every time you send an email out to prospective families, and I hope you're doing that. I hope you're sending things out to not just your enrolled families, but to prospective families. But send it out in your newsletter so that even your current families get it, and they say, hey, really, honestly, if you send a link and say, here's a link to our latest brochure, would y'all please send this out to all your friends? Very little of them are actually going to share that brochure with their friends. But if you send a link out that says, hey, I have 2 links to 2 articles on our website, on our blog, one talking about 7 tips to choosing a college and the other one about credit card danger for graduating seniors. If you have a senior in your friend network, please forward this on to them. Well, all of a sudden, that your current families are becoming ambassadors of this content. They're republishing the content, and they're sharing it with their social networks. Imagine if families put this out on the web, on Facebook, on Twitter, pin it on Pinterest, and all of a sudden you're giving them the kind of content that they want to share with their friends. They may not be as eager to share your promotional brochure as you are as an admissions professional. They're just not comfortable doing that, but they're more than comfortable helping somebody, solve a problem, alleviate a fear, talking about the things that we've talked about in this written content. So, this is the kind of things we want to address. So I've spent a lot of time on written content just to give you an idea of what the subject matter of the content that I'm talking about. We talked about audio content. I'm not going to go through as many examples because I think you get the idea, but I'll mention a couple of them here. But just in the type of content delivery, people like to listen to things. Podcasts. We have a podcast. It's called schoolmarketingpodcast.com. And we just published our 26th episode where we're talking about, marketing issues, things that are related to marketing your school. And so we have a podcast. You're probably, if you go to a church somewhere, most likely the pastor has a podcast of his sermons. It's just a way to, it's really just a way to listen to a recording, an MP3 recording of whatever it was delivered, a sermon or a conversation. A podcast maybe gets a little more formal where it actually, comes in through iTunes and people can subscribe to podcasts and be notified when something new comes up. You don't have to even go to that level. You can just produce a MP3 file, put it on your website onto a blog, and you've got content, audio content. So that's just as easy to do. Podcasts are certainly a way. You could have a principals podcast or an elementary podcast where you're talking about. Think about if you had a podcast. It's really like a radio interview, like I mentioned here. You're just having guests on. You're having people talk about conversations. I like to keep them. If you'll notice, all of our podcast episodes are 14 minutes and 29 seconds long. And there's a reason for that, and you'll learn about that as you find out more about that podcast. But you can keep them to 10 minutes, maybe 30 minutes at the most. But I like to think about it as radio segments. If you listen to any talk radio or interviews with people on different radio stations, most every interview is going to be about 10 to 15 minutes long, maybe 20. And that's what, even if a TV show has a guest on, a talk show, they're going to be about 15 to 20 minutes long. And so that's about typical time frame for you to have a radio interview. You could interview community partners to talk about the same things we've been talking about, the needs, problems, and pains and frustrations and fears. You could have legislators on talking about the impact of legislation on education. You can do all kinds of things. You could also be interviewed and get yourself on interviews and have those recorded interviews posted. But again, if you're the one being interviewed, you're probably more likely talking about your school, and that's not as helpful as you interviewing somebody else. Because again, you're wanting to produce content that is shareable, and that's what you really want in marketing. Telephone interviews is another great tool for audio. I'm working with a school in Maryland, just outside of D.C., who is implementing this, where the chief operations officer, not particularly fond of some of the other videos or anything like that, but he really latched on to this telephone interviews through a service called freeconferencecallhd.com for high definition. freeconferencecallhd.com, free service. He can record a phone call. It's a conference call line, so he calls they both call in, the person he's interviewing calls in, they record the interview, and he's given an MP3 file that he can upload to his website. And what he's able to do is he's able to talk to faculty members. He's interviewed a great interview with a family who, again, was a former homeschool family. One of their kids was already in a public school, one was homeschooled, one was in private school. And they've switched now the homeschool one over to the Christian school because they just weren't having success at home with the homeschool. And she kind of gives her testimony. It's a wonderful opportunity. She wasn't really fond of the video idea, but she was more than happy to talk for 10 minutes on a phone call. And they recorded the phone call, uploaded it, made a great audio content, and now they can put that on their website. They can put that throughout social media. They can use that in so many ways to help market their school. So we talked about audio. We'll finish up here with visual. You can get the idea. Video testimonials, obviously, for those who do like. I like to keep these short. Keep these, again, 1 to 3 minutes is probably most I would do. Shorter the better. Because, again, you're thinking about the content that you would share on social media, for instance. Somebody might sit on a website and watch a 10-minute video, but if you're talking about Facebook newsfeed, people want to see a short video. And so creating video testimonials, you can get all the big expensive equipment you want, but really take your smartphone, turn it sideways. Don't ever record a video up and down. Always record it sideways like it would be like a movie screen. That's how your laptop screen is. You want to think horizontal. So record your video that way. You can even get some microphones that go in with it. If not, just record a real good audio to your video and record some testimonials. Again, thinking about the types of people that you're trying to reach. Get the testimonials that match that. Give a testimonial of a family who's come out of homeschool, or maybe they've contemplated, they were in public elementary and they thought that was fine because their kids are young and they're not getting, the culture's still appropriate, but maybe find some people who can talk specifically about what they've gained by being in the Christian school as opposed to being in the public school, even in elementary. And so share those kind of testimonials. You need to be doing that. Pinterest is another way I wanted to quickly mention as we get to the end, is just understanding how important it is to pinning content. If those of you are on Pinterest, yes, you're going to create, you want a Pinterest account for your school, and you want to pin things about your school, and that's okay, but you've got to create some boards that people want to follow. They want to see your content. They want to repin that to their friends. That's the magic of Pinterest, is when somebody comes to one of your boards and repins something that you posted, and they pin it over to their boards, and it goes out to their network of people and all their followers, that's when the magic happens with Pinterest. So again, maybe pinning something that's just about your school is not so relevant, but if you pin articles, again, go back, create a written article, put a photo on the page that's pinnable, and then you pin that article onto a board specifically for middle school parenting or graduating senior parenting or something like that. You create specific boards for specific people, and then you've got content that's written well, but it's also got a photo there that's pinnable. That's how that works. It's magic, and it's so fun to see it actually working. Webinars are really cool. The school that we know that has actually tried last year to do webinars in lieu of a traditional open house. Taking some of that, and I'm not sure they're even that excited about it yet. They're not sure that's the only way to do it. But again, using that, maybe instead of just limiting the audience, the only people that hear that presentation that you've got ready or that your head of school has ready, instead of just limiting it to the 10 or 20 or 30 people that are at the open house, why not make some of that content available to everybody and talk about some things that are relevant, and then making that webinar available to other people and put it out on social media so people can see the content first, and you're earning trust in this way, and then that will drive them and attract them to your next open house, marketing event, preview night, or whatever. And so that's what we want to do, is be thinking about these three types of content, three ways to attract the right kinds of families to your school: written, audio, and visual content. But it's got to be surrounded, it's got to be targeted, focused on the needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears, because that's how we get to getting people with specific needs, getting those audiences who have very specific needs, problems, pains, frustrations, and fears to know, like, and trust you. And so that's what our presentation is about today, getting these three ways to attract the families. You've got your marketing formula. You've got these three ways, and you start producing the content that attracts the right kind of families. You've got to have your typical promotional materials do not attract people. They inform people. You can give it to certain people, but we're looking for ways to attract, like a magnet, to attract the right kinds of families to your school. All right, real quickly, I promised free for your school, as just specifically for NCSA members who registered for this call. We're making this available, free 45-minute consultation. We want to just listen. We like to talk about marketing. We like to talk about social media marketing, strategy, whatever it is that you're concerned about. Any question you want, you get to talk about it. We listen, And I promise you, here's what, I'm not going to pitch you. You're not going to have to listen to a 30-minute presentation on me or anything like that. You're going to hear us ask a lot of questions. We're going to get some information from you in advance before we actually have the phone consultation that'll help us get it going and get the conversation started. We listen, we ask questions, and what we do is, I promise, to provide 2 practical ideas that you can begin implementing immediately. And it's all free. It's just there for you, and we want to make that available to you. And so I'll go through the details on this page. This is an exclusive page just for NCSA members who registered for this presentation, and that is yourschoolmarketing.com/NCSA45 for that 45-minute consultation. That's available to you. So that's what I want you to go to. I want your next step to be registering for that, getting that signed up. Again, with the holidays, we're going to do as much as we can. I know many of you, we may just get all this done in January. If you can first to contact us, we might have an opportunity to get that in before the end of the year, because we want to help you. We want to help grow Christian schools. We believe in your mission. We believe in what you're doing. We have a heart for ministry, and we want to help you do that. So please visit yourschoolmarketing.com/NCSA45. You have to go to that specific page to register for this, get this free consultation with us. So I hope that what we've done today is provide value to you, give you an opportunity to see a little bit about what we do, but also I just want you to leave here with probably so many things that you can begin implementing right away. You're right there at that season. I know many of you have already put ads in the paper. You've already put in magazines. You've already got that going. You're starting to think about your next open house in January. Some of you are having them this month. But I just want you to be thinking, is wherever you're at, to start thinking about producing content that educates and builds trust based on the needs, problems, pains, and frustrations and fears of your audience. And I believe that will be really turn marketing around for your school. And so my name is Randy Vaughn. I'm thrilled to be able to present this information to you. Again, looking forward to meeting many of you in Nashville in March at part of the NCSA conference. So again, look forward to there. Hopefully communicating with many of you between now and then during this consultation. You can go to our website, go to that link on the page, NCSA45, to get that. You can then go search our website, connect with us on Facebook and Twitter and all the other places we're at, and then read our blog, and you're just going to get a lot of content there. So hopefully this has been a blessing to you today. Look forward to sharing with you at a future time. But again, thank you for your time today, and we are finished.